My name is Dirk van Zyl. I'm professor of mining engineering at the University of British Columbia, and today's lecture is on sustainable development concepts. We will look at a short history of sustainable development, talk about a few leaders in this area over time, and then get into specific concepts such as natural step, strong and weak sustainability, and then we'll get into the mining connection and talking about mining and SD terminology, because not everybody is comfortable to actually think of a non-renewable resource and sustainable development in the same sentence or in the same thought. A short history of sustainable development. When you go back in the recent literature, you find that this term is first used in a book on the 1972 UN Stockholm Conference on the human environment. In 1980, the IUCN, the World Wildlife Fund, and UNEP published a report on world conservation strategies, living resource conservation for sustainable development. And so that title is then taken up right, or that terminology is taken up right in the title. In 1983, the Norwegian Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland was asked by the UN Secretary General to head a UN commission to consider the ideas developed at a meeting in Stockholm. And out of this work in '87 came the now very well-known Our Common Future, also often referred to as the Brundtland Commission report. And in this report, we find one of the very first definitions of sustainable development. Humanity has the ability to make development sustainable, to ensure that it meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I want you to note at this point, though, that this was 1987. That is not that long ago that this definition came about. And so it's really after this, or in the same time frame, that people started working in very diverse areas in sustainable development. And the definitions and ideas have been refined over time. When you look at this definition in front of us, a number of important points should be brought to bear. The first one is this deals with the present as well as with the future. So it deals with this long-term generational effects. And so we do not only look into the future, but we also look at the present. The other piece that's important is that it talks about needs, and therefore not anything much beyond needs. And I'll come back to that as the lecture proceeds. Since 1987, the United Nations had a number of initiatives. In 1992, in Rio, the UN Conference on Environment and Development took place. Out of that came what is known as Agenda 21, which is quite an extensive document describing the decisions made at this conference. This was followed up 10 years later in 2002 in Johannesburg by the UN World Summit on Sustainable Development. And out of that came the Johannesburg Declaration and a final report. The next UN Conference on Sustainable Development is then held in 2012 in Rio de Janeiro. Over time, there have been a number of very prominent leaders in this arena. And I'm listing a few here, and there are many others that clearly I cannot list or that we won't list. But if you go down some of the literature paths, you'll find John Elkington, who started sustainability, as a company in the late 80s. Karl-Henrik Robert, Richard Sandbrook, who was at the International Institute on Environment and Development, David Ronells, that is at the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and actually before that at the IIED. You have people like Hunter and Amory Lovins of the Rocky Mountain Institute, a famous early book on natural capitalism. And then here in Vancouver, David Suzuki of the David Suzuki Foundation. Not all of these leaders have necessarily been embraced by industry from the beginning, but over time it has become very, very significant part of the development. There are many other contributions from many other people, and I would recommend that you, as you move forward in your studies of this topic, you actually find a few that you like and how they actually think about sustainable development, and then follow their activities. Consistently review their approach as it relates to the concepts of sustainable development. And I think that's really to make sure that we maintain a clear picture of where this topic is going. A few words about John Elkington and sustainability. The company was established in 1987. It is a think tank and strategy consultancy working to inspire transformative business leadership on the sustainability agenda. And there's lots of information available on the website. John Elkington has stepped aside a little bit from the company. He's still involved with the board, but not in the day-to-day activities. And he is still a major contributor to the thinking in this broad area of sustainable development. So far, he's written 18 books. Some of the early ones was Cannibals with Forks, where he actually defined the triple bottom line. And then he had one on the chrysalis economy. And the most recent book is The Zero Noughts, Breaking the Sustainability Barrier. And there's many projects that John worked on over time. And again, you can find those on the web. An important development, and it's interesting when you look at these dates. Let me just point this out again. Brundtland Commission Report, 1987. John Elkington started sustainability in 1987. 1989, in Sweden, Karl-Henrik Robert, an oncologist, started what he called the Natural Step. And the Natural Step is a group that work extensively with companies and cities in developing sustainability planning. And they've got a very active consultancy worldwide. It's based on well-developed principles, approach and framework that is easy to understand. And so let me go through their principles that they've put forward under the Natural Step. The first one is, and they call it Principles for a Sustainable Society. The first one is reduce and eventually eliminate our contribution to the systematic accumulation of materials from the Earth's crust. Okay, and what this implies is that we really trying to substitute our use of certain minerals that are scarce in nature with others that are more abundant, using all the mined materials efficiently. And you can realize just how tough a prospect this is, and systematically reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. That's the first principle of the Natural Step. Second one is to reduce and eliminate our contribution to the systematic accumulation of substances produced by society. A systematic substituting certain persistent and unnatural compounds with ones that are normally abundant or break down more easily in nature, and also using substances that's produced by society very efficiently so that we don't have waste or extra materials that we have to get rid of. The third one is to reduce and eliminate our contribution to the ongoing physical degradation of nature. So we're looking at drawing resources only from well-managed ecosystems, systematically pursuing productive and efficient ways of using these resources, but also the land from which they come, and exercising caution in all kinds of modifications to nature, over-harvesting, introduction of invasive species, and a number of issues. And clearly one can talk about policy-related issues here extensively and weigh it against the success of following this principle or not. The fourth principle is to reduce and eliminate our contribution to conditions that systematically undermine people's ability to meet their basic needs. This means offering products and services and changing practices and suppliers and business models to make sure that human rights are respected, income-making barriers are removed, safe and healthy work environments are provided, and living conditions allow local communities to meet the needs of citizens. These four principles are very much are fairly simple, they're fairly straightforward, and the natural step has actually developed a process of how they facilitate a series of discussions then with communities, with cities, with companies to implement the natural step. One big part of their approach is backcasting. And the idea is to look into the future and to think of what that future would look like. And once we get to that thinking and we've got a clear vision of where we want to go, we then backcast to the present to design the path into the future. And so when you hear the term backcasting, that is pretty much what they mean. So it's going through these four steps of awareness, a baseline analysis of what the conditions are at this point, then into a compelling vision for the future, and then an action, a path of action to get us from the present to the future. So it's these four components then: an awareness, a baseline, a compelling vision of where we want to go, and then a series of actions that can get us there. I strongly recommend that you look at their website and at the cities that they've worked with. There's been quite a bit of success in North America, in Europe, and a number of other locations of cities using the natural step as a basis for their sustainability planning. The capitals concept is one of looking at four types of capital: natural capital, human-made capital or produced capital, human capital, and social capital. And so by thinking of that think of a city in terms of the natural capital and the natural beauty or all the natural resources that are out there. Then we have the human-made capital, the infrastructure, the buildings, all of that. We have the human capital, the people doing the work, producing, contributing, and then finally we have the social capital, which really is the social fabric amongst the people, the relationships of trust and reciprocity and cooperation and active goodwill amongst all these different groups. So we can think of a group of people, any assembly of people in a city, in a company, wherever, in terms of these capitals. And then the next step that comes out of it is then the idea of strong and weak sustainability. Strong sustainability believes that the existing stock of natural capital must be maintained and enhanced because the functions it performs cannot be duplicated by manufactured capital. So the natural capital should not be changed. The weak sustainability says no, manufactured capital of equal value take the place of natural capital. And you can clearly see that these two views of strong sustainability and weak sustainability are very much in conflict. And when you read the literature in this area, you will find that there are people that feel very strongly about the strong sustainability concept, meaning that we really do not want to lose any natural capital to build man-made or manufactured capital. The weak sustainability argument is one that says we will take the natural capital, we will transform it into manufactured capital of equal value, or in some cases more, and therefore we will contribute to sustainability that way. I want to highlight this. This is clearly something that needs to be discussed at length, and I would recommend also that you look at this broad concept, because it is very, very useful area to look at. There are very different images of sustainable development out there. We already referred to John Elkington's The Triple Bottom Line, which was put forth in his book in terms of economic, social, and environmental. And those are sort of the three classic bottom lines that people always look at in terms of sustainability and sustainable development. And in a few minutes here, I'll talk about another image where I try to combine these ideas a little bit. People also refer to as the three pillars, pretty much the same three, or the three-legged stool, with the image that if one of these pillars is too weak, or one of the legs of the stool is weak, then clearly it's very difficult to maintain a balance when you sit down, or when you try to have a structure, to hold up a structure with three pillars. So the images are very useful, but that is what they are. They're images. Here is another one indicating the importance of the environment, with society being in the environment but not as big as the environment, and then the economy as a subset of society, so that we, if you think of us in terms of mine development, so we don't think of the mine only in economic terms, but really thinking of the mine as being located and in this backdrop of the environment, that society will benefit from the mine, and that the economics of the mine then is something that stands out by itself, but not overwhelm all the other issues. Let me spend a little bit of time on this figure that developed over time. It was first suggested to me, the first parts of it were suggested to me by Richard Sandbrook, actually, and as usual, all good things happen on napkins when you have lunch. And so when you look at this, you have right in the center the three circles. Think of it almost as a Venn diagram, overlapping. One dealing with environmental aspects, the other with the community, the other with economics. And I'm sure you have seen this before, and people then refer to the central overlap of these three circles as the place where sustainable development lives. And each of the other parts of the circles, people have given it different terminologies to indicate the importance of them, but not at the same extent as that of sustainable development. There is a fourth circle effectively, and that is, and I'm showing it here as a box, and that is governance. Those are really the four basic pieces to sustainable development. Environmental, community, economics, and governance. And the governance issues are extremely important, not only from the point of view of company governance, but also of the governance of companies themselves and how they would do that internally if we go down the path of sustainable development. So think of those then as the four central pieces. On the upper left-hand corner, you can see scale, local, regional, national. Clearly, these four things, or four components, environment, economics, community, governance, are very different at each scale. Also, the impacts, positive and negative, the contributions of projects are different at local, regional, and national scale. The demographics are different. The concerns about sustainable development are different at these different scales. And I've not even listed the international scale. So the scale issue becomes extremely important. And we will actually spend some time on that as well in future lectures. At the bottom, we indicate it's over time, so it's multi-generational. It's always interesting to talk about that. How long is long enough? Are we looking at thousands of years? Are we looking at 1,000 years? It's interesting when you look at North America and you look at the First Nations in Canada and the Native Americans in the US, all the various groups from Arizona all the way to the Northwest Territories always talk about 7 generations as a multi-generational issue. So 7 generations, depending how you calculate it, somewhere between 150 and 200 years is, in the sense of the First Nations, for them it's multi-generational. And that is not a bad number to keep in mind, that we can look at this over that time frame. An important piece in mining is technology. And that is shown in the upper right-hand corner. Technology drives a lot of the economics of mining. Technology also drives environmental implications. It also drives community implications, and it drives governance implications. So we cannot get away from the importance of technology. As a matter of fact, I would suggest that as technology change, that we actually consider its impact on environmental, community, economics, and governance. And that we almost make that it's tough to make it a requirement, but make it an important consideration for technology developers to consider all those aspects instead of just one, meaning economics or better environmental performance or whatever. And then just to remind us of the whole basis for sustainable development, I have the box at the lower right-hand side indicating we're talking about needs and not wants. And so this is then where one can start looking at lifestyle issues and the issues around consumerism, etc. And and have a very lively debate on this whole basis of sustainable development and lifestyle, consumerism, etc. So this is, I think, an image that tries to capture a whole lot of the issues around sustainable development, and it has worked fairly well for me to at least remind me of the pieces that I need to include in considerations of sustainable development issues. Now, there's another piece, and that is sustainability versus sustainable development. Jonathan Porritt, in his book, suggests that sustainability refers to the capacity for continuous into the long-term future. So that's pretty much the definition of sustainability. End goal, desired destination for all species is to be sustainable. He then says that human society can continue to exist because ecosystems are able to go on providing life-sustaining services, and that society is capable of organizing itself so that people have the opportunity to fulfill their needs. All part of sustainability. And he then says sustainable development is the process or the journey by which we move to sustainability. It's a nice image, but I think as we actually listen to how the term sustainability and sustainable development, how these two terms are used, very often sustainability is used as a replacement or a synonym of sustainable development. And as the lecture goes on, I'll say more about this issue. A slightly different view was proposed by Rod Eggert, and he suggests that sustainability is very often used in terms of environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, social and cultural sustainability. And when it's used in that form, it's very much a one-dimensional concept. It deals with one of these 3 legs, 4 legs at a time, one of these issues at a time. But he then suggests that sustainable development is a multidimensional concept because it integrates and it strives to sustain or even enhance all the dimensions. So it's not just one, it's all of them. I'm spending time talking about this because terminology is an extremely important piece when we talk about mining and sustainable development. And we are at a place today where the terminology is not as clear and as pure as I would like to see it, and sometimes it can be very confusing, especially to people who are new to this topic. The topic is very broad, and we have to be very careful that we don't use these terms to actually diminish their importance of how we move forward. Bob Gibson, in his book on sustainability assessment, provide this list of essentials of the concept of sustainability. And he says the concept is really a challenge to conventional thinking and practice. It is long as well as short-term well-being. It's about all of that. It's comprehensive. It's covering all the core issues of decision-making. And it's a recognition of links and interdependencies, especially between humans and the biophysical foundations for life. It's embedded in a world of complexity and surprise, in which precautionary approaches are necessary. It's a recognition of both inviolable limits and endless opportunities to create innovation. It's about open-ended processes. It's not a state. It's about intertwined means and ends of culture and governance, as well as ecology, society, and economy. And it is both universal and context dependent. This is a great list again, because as we go through this list, as engineers as well, we can look at this and say, wow, so let's just pick up on a few of these. We need to look at this as a comprehensive issue, and the third bullet on this slide. It's comprehensive, and it's covering all the core issues of decision making. So we really need to think of us as we make decisions about projects. And the whole idea of it being embedded in a world of complexity, and therefore the precautionary approaches or precautionary principle becomes an important part. And again, that is something that we will pick up in future lectures in this series. So let's have a brief discussion on the mining connection. And this is very brief, because the next lecture in this series will really focus on some of the mining legacies and some of the approaches that have been used in the past, some of it fairly recent past, just to bring us up to date on a bit of a historical perspective. But here's some developments from the 1990s, and this is what I will expand on these issues, on the issues in this slide in the next lecture in this series. The Whitehorse Mining Initiative in Canada was from 1993 to 1994. This was a very, very important initiative that was very early, dealing with the interactions between society, environment, economics, specifically focused on mining. Placer Dome, Vancouver-based company, established a sustainable development policy in 1998. They were one of the very first mining companies to do so, and they issued their first sustainability report that was titled, "It's About Our Future." We can also have long discussions about this, because unfortunately they got criticized heavily by at least one NGO in terms of not really being diligent about what they in doing what they say they were doing, or and instead of supporting this whole effort, I think it actually did more harm than any good at that point. In February 1989, 9 of the largest mining and metal company CEOs met at the annual Davos, Switzerland Economic Forum, World Economic Forum, and they decided to pursue a process to improve the image of mining. This whole process was kicked off in 1999 as the Global Mining Initiative, and out of the Global Mining Initiative came a report. Then there was actually, as part of the input to the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg in 2002. A very important independent project of the Global Mining Initiative was the project Mining, Minerals and Sustainable Development. And again, I will expand considerably on that. When you look at ongoing developments at this point, many mining companies now embrace sustainable development principles. There's ongoing discourse about mining and sustainable development. There are a number of institutes in the world dealing specifically with this topic, some of it at universities, some of it outside universities. Sustainability reporting is now broadly done by mining companies, and clear business cases have been developed for sustainable development, and that is a major motivation for mining companies to implement sustainable development principles as far as they can. The concept of sustainability and sustainable development suggests the following principles or social goals associated with mining. This is Rod Eggers' suggestion, and I think very well taken. Rod, by the way, is a mineral economist, and so this is a bit colored by that background, but I think it's a very important view. It's facilitate the creation of mineral wealth, ensure that mineral development occurs in an economically and socially efficient manner, distribute the surplus from mining fairly, very difficult issue, and sustain the benefits of mining even after a mine closes. So these are four very interesting principles suggested by Rod in terms of mining and sustainable development. And we'll come back and talk about some of these at a later time. Now, mining and sustainable development. Many people say, well, you know, this is it is not really two terms that we should use in the same sentence. But let me explain a few things on this slide and then move on to talk about the ideas of renewable resources and non-renewable resources and how they are different. Sustainable development does not refer to sustainability of the industry, a company, or a mine. For example, if we say sustainable mining, we can think of it as an oxymoron if it's not adequately qualified. If somebody says sustainable mining, in my perspective, is mining that takes into account all the four pieces of mining or of sustainable development, one gets a little closer to it. But just used as a term, sustainable mining by itself really doesn't say much. Sustainable development is a culture that addresses in very clear and practical terms how mining can contribute to sustainable development. So think of us, when we think of this terminology with respect to mining, it's really looking at how that contributions can happen. It's a concept of needs, an idea of limitations. It's a future-oriented paradigm and a process of change. And I think you keep hearing the same words here. This is a change process. This is not stagnant. This is looking into the future, wishing for a new future, visioning where we want to be, backcasting, planning for it. All of these various approaches have very much the same underlying thinking in terms of this. When we talk about renewable resources, we talk about sustainable forests, sustainable fisheries, and although it takes time to define what is a sustainable forest in terms of both the vegetative cover, the presence of organics in the soil, the presence of all the species that make up the forest, not only the plant species but also the animals, and there's been a lot of work done on that topic. There's been a lot of work done on sustainable fisheries. For non-renewable resources, we really need to talk about the contributions that mining makes to sustainable development. That's how we look at non-renewable resources. The contributions that, for instance, oil sand recovery, oil from oil sand mining makes to sustainable development. And so what are those? What are those contributions of mining to sustainable development? In a global sense, it really deals with all the goods and services that's provided to improve overall standard of living. And we know we're in a period of what some people refer to as a super cycle of metal prices, but it's because there's a demand in the developing countries for these metals, and that's why we have the cycle that we're dealing with right now. But that's the global level. At the local level, a specific mine is always located in the framework of environment, community, economics, and governance. And that local mine must make a contribution to sustainable development at that level or at the regional level. And again, in one of the lectures in this series, we will spend quite a bit of time how one would actually evaluate the contributions to sustainable development from a mine. So the real quest then is to focus on the contributions that mining makes to sustainable development or to sustainability. It's addressing this issue, the contributions that it makes, that will be the guide to insights and hopefully to solutions. I can suggest to you right now that if you work in mining, work in this area, and you ask yourself during the mine design, what do we need to do to contribute to sustainable development? That question will actually drive you to new insights and I believe to new solutions of how you're going to do the work. SD or sustainability, sustainable development, sustainability is a process of change. It's a journey, it's not a destination. This was already pointed out by Bob Gibson, but don't think that we will finally get to the place where we will kick back and say, we have now maintained sustainable development and we are there. And now we just have to maintain it. Trust me, you'll never get there. And so thank you for joining this journey of exploration, learning and questioning, and hopefully we'll all work together to develop some new insights in this very, very broad and exciting area. Thank you.